broadcast. I just had to find my record button. It was kind of hiding. Good evening to everyone who's joined us. So the title of our subject tonight on the webinar is Protecting Others from Myself. That's kind of intriguing, right? But it's a little bit of an analogy how we're protecting people from ourselves when it comes to spreading the virus. But what we've discovered through the years is that there are other things about us that we can also protect others from, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Life Model Works is a 50-year-old nonprofit, and so we've been at this a long time trying to help people grow in social and emotional maturity. And as things have developed through the decades, we've been working hard at helping people to grow in relational skills. And beneath that would be to eliminate hatred from our lives and from the lives of other people. I'm thinking of something that Dr. Martin Luther King said that has just struck me. I never heard this until recently. And he said, "I'd rather die than hate you." And I've just meditated on that sentence deeply in the last few months, and it's just penetrating my heart and mind. So to tell you a little bit about Life Model Works and some of the things that we do. First of all, you can follow us on Twitter every day, where we give inspirational ditties for banishing hatred in our world and promoting healthy relationships. We also have a website, lifemodelworks.org. So I'll say that a couple times in the broadcast. Very great resource for you to know about when it comes to knowing who we are. And I've co-written an article there with Dr. Jim Wilder on the homepage. That is kind of our manifesto article that is about this subject of banishing hatred. Also, we have been doing daily Facebook live events where we at 2 o'clock Eastern time, we've been coming on every day for the last couple of weeks talking about passing the peace, which is also a booklet and soon to be an audio booklet that's available. That is an amazing practice of passing peace to people that have been traumatized or have been through difficult situations. We have a number of books. We've written many books in our organization. We have like an ecosystem of developers. And so those are all available on the store at our website. And we love to give away materials. We do a lot of things for free or low cost. One of the things that we recently did was we gave hundreds of our book, Joy Starts Here, to the Ambleside School Network around the world, and for their staff and families. And we, as I said, are promoting social and emotional maturity that is based in a very interesting mashup of some of the best and latest brain science with biblical theology. And so this evening, you're going to be introduced, if you haven't been already, to Dr. Jim Wilder, who is coming on next. And so Jim, go ahead and come on. And so Dr. Wilder is my colleague. Jim is a neurotheologian and the chief life model thought leader through the decades. Jim's been with the organization from its earliest days. We really consider him our founder. And Jim has authored many, many books. And the newest one is coming out this month. It's called Renovated. So you'll see that on our website. And so Jim, welcome to the broadcast, the webinar.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Seems like a timely discussion.
Yes, it does indeed. And a very interesting analogy, right? Because we've been protecting people from the virus, not spreading it ourselves, but there's other kinds of viruses that we can spread if we're not careful. So I've got two simple questions for you, Jim. I'm going to start with the first one, and then you're going to introduce some of our guests tonight. So the first question, here we go. Why do you consider it is so important to learn how to protect others from ourselves?
Well, I've been thinking about that, of course, for years, because so many of the people that come in to have counseling have had someone in their family or someone in their immediate groups that's been abusive to them. And usually whoever the perpetrator is doesn't see that as their own problem. Whatever they do, well, you made me mad or something else, other justification says it's okay to treat other people that way because, you know, how could I possibly be dangerous to you? And we even discovered that in order to deal with things like domestic violence, one of the things that was important was to share the pain that you were producing in other people's lives, so that you learned, I actually have to protect you from myself. So then looking at all the empty shelves in the stores and realize, yeah, here's people who have not thought about others when they decided they needed to have 5 years supply of toilet paper or something like that. They're missing this skill for protecting other people from their own um, worries, even in this case. And then we've all seen people running around without what masks or concerns, or thinking, well, um, I couldn't possibly be spreading anything bad that might kill you. And this lack of protecting others from ourselves has really shown up um, as a crucial thing in culture, when it's something that we should actually learn just about the time we become adults at age 12 or 13. And we learn that we're going to be part of a culture, part of a group of people, part of uh, this cluster that looks out for each other. And when you've actually learned to do it, it feels right. There's something about the whole thing of protecting others from ourselves that we start feeling like, yeah, that's the kind of people I want to be and I want to be around. And so I'm thinking that this epidemic, when it's really easy to tell who's protecting others from themselves and who isn't, just based on whether they give you your 6 foot clearance and, otherwise take precautions. That's a good time to keep our mind learning. Now, what does it feel like when others don't protect me from themselves? And how does it feel to me to be the kind of person that protects others? So those are the, kind of what makes the whole discussion very important right at this time. It's a good time to learn these things. And it's also time to look, together at the wide ramifications that come from having learned successfully, to protect others from myself.
Yeah. So the second question, Jim, is about neuroscience. You're a neuroscientist, and you understand and have come to understand from your studies about what you've called enemy mode and relational mode, and how different they are, and that this ties into what goes on in our brains, and it ties into how we can learn the skill to protect others from ourselves. Can you describe that a little bit? And then from there, you can go ahead and introduce our guest.
Yeah. Well, this is a very, to me, significant, but it'll be an odd thought for most people. But I've been studying for people who lead cults, especially deadly cults. Charles Manson was very active in the area where I was a counselor. We met people that have been impacted by him, by other kinds of strange cults, killers, uh, one sort or another. And what I found out was that they paid a lot of attention to how other people felt. So they tracked other people's reactions and feelings, but they used whatever they tracked against them. It was like everybody was their enemy. Um, and so I took a profiling course from an FBI profiler on studying the criminal mind as one of these studies. You had a fellow out in your area there, Kansas City, called BTK,
Yeah.
which uh, he actually ended up being somewhat of a church official. Uh, had an official function. He was sort of the dog catcher for the city and things like that. But he was very careful for tracking and paying exactly close attention to how his victims were going to feel, but without sharing that pain with them. That's enemy mode. That's how you think about your enemies. You think about what's going to cause them pain, and then you use them against them. Well, it's very, very close to what we do when we're in a relational mode. That is, we pay close attention to what's going to happen or how other people are going to feel, But this time in relational mode, we have a connection with them, so we intend to share the feeling that they're having. And part of protecting others from ourselves is not just paying attention to how they're going to feel, but being very interested in sharing whatever it is that feeling might be with them. One of the reasons why giving people power almost always makes them sociopathic is that it allows you to get people to do what you want without having to care about how they feel about it. So the difference again between this relational mode of watching people's feelings and the enemy mode is in the relational mode, we are really connecting with them. We're sharing with them. We're more than empathizing. We're entering into their experience. And so one of the things that we need to do then to be protective in culture is to notice the impact we're having on other people, but to go farther and share that with them, and when possible, to protect them from any damage that we might create. And you know, one of the interesting things for me has always been that some of the best things about us are often the things that create the damage. So if I use my intelligence to make you feel stupid, or I use my attractiveness to make you feel ugly, or whatever it is, you know, they're good characteristics of myself, but I don't protect you from the impact that that might have, then I haven't really been very protective, have I? I'm just going about treating you, maybe I don't think of you as my enemy, but certainly as a person that doesn't matter to me. So if we're going to eliminate hatred, which is what you started out talking about, it's going to be because we learn to share the pain of others in some very significant, important kind of way. So
Very good. So we have some guests with us tonight, and I'm going to let you take over. I'm going to take my camera off and mute myself and listen.
yes, well, I am very delighted to introduce to you a series of guests. Our first guest is going to be Karen Zauder Brass, a very delightful person with hello, Karen, a whole variety of credits to her name. She's an author of several books. The first one is called I Am a Stand-Upster, and that comes to have meaning to us when we realize that Karen's father was a Holocaust survivor, and he stood up against anyone being mean or taking advantage of other people. It's like, you know, I'm not going to stand by and let this sort of thing happen. And as the child of a Holocaust survivor, she also wrote this very important book called When the Trauma Filters Through. And the experiences that have happened to your people, your family, they don't just end with you. They go on to impact your whole life and the life of the people around them. And so Karen, you've become a educator. You talk to many groups about the impact of standing up for others, and you're speaker for the Coalition Against Global Genocide, looking out for victimized groups across the globe. And one of the things that struck me about your father was a story that you tell about after he'd been through 4 of the concentration camps, been on the death march, and was eventually liberated by the American soldiers. As he was now living in town, a group of German children decided, or young boys, to beat him up, and they barely sort of escaped that assault on him. And so Sergeant Larry, I'll call him, who was kind of sheltering him, got really angry about this. He went out and gathered out some German boys that he caught the next day. They weren't the same ones that beat up your dad, but he said to your dad, well, go ahead and beat them up. Let's get some fairness here. And your father wouldn't do it. He was angry as could be about what had happened to him, but something in him thought it was unfair to beat up these boys. And so he asked them in German if they were had been in Hitler's youth. One said no, and your father told him to go home and study and listen and learn about the impact of what had happened. The other one, boy, I believe, said something like, "What's it to you?" Because apparently he had been. And your father lifted him up, let him go as well, also telling him to go and learn, which he's actually using a phrase from the Rabbi Hillel, I think, right there. That they didn't recognize. But later on in life, when he was old, very sick, and living at your house, some of the effects of his anger started to filter through, and it was showing up with your dog Chapper. And you had to go talk with him, with your father, and say, you need to protect others from yourself. So could you tell us a little bit about how you experienced the importance of reminding your father really who he was, and at his core, calling out his best identity?
Of course. Thank you. I really like this particular story myself. It affected our entire family. My children were basically 5 and 6 when this happened. So just imagine we're all together living under one roof, and this dog had been in our family for a number of years, and my father had always pet him and always spent time with him. It was a normal everyday thing. However, towards the end of his life, the cancer became very, very painful, and he began swearing and yelling and screaming like he had never done before in my life. It was almost funny because it was so unusual for him. He was such a stoic man when he was in public. When he was with my children, he was a jolly granddad. But Chapper began to kind of hide from him and almost duck. And I noticed that Chapper began to growl at my youngest child. And within 1 week, Chapper was gone. I did hire a trainer to come and try to help us to figure out what we could do differently, but my suspicion came to be true, that it was my father verbally abusing this dog, and the dog had no other outlet. The dog knew that my father was the patriarch in our family, and so the dog went to the youngest. I think that was more like a pack response, although many may not believe in that. I feel like I saw it in action. He went to my youngest child and growled whenever my son came around. And my father was heartbroken when he realized what he had been doing. When I sat down with him behind closed doors and said, "Dad, you need to understand that you're affecting your favorite person in the whole world, your grandson." And he did not make the connection. Speaking about connections, he had not made the connection that this dog was acting out his emotions. The hot potato effect was loud and clear for Chapper. I had grown up with it. And when he moved in with me, I had told him that I was not going to allow him to hot potato his emotions onto me, and then he could witness me doing it onto my children. I told him that wouldn't be acceptable. Speaking about boundaries. So
Yes.
when he did have this experience with me, he actually listened to me express pretty much what I've just shared with you all now. And then he said, "I'm going to pretend like this conversation never happened," while he was leaning forward in great pain on his knees with his elbows. And so I said, "Okay, Dad, well, new rules. The dog's no longer allowed to be in here, and you're not allowed to come out unless you're behaving appropriately." And I left and closed the door behind me. I had great respect for my father. That was not a normal behavior for me to do, but it was the only behavior I had available based on what was happening to my family. And I basically gave him the hot potato back. And within 1 hour, my dad opened the door and he began making noises with the pots and pans like he always did when he wanted my attention towards the end. And I got close to him and he said, "You're absolutely right. I have had a pressure cooker holding all my anger and all my serious emotions about my childhood. And I feel like the cancer and the pain I'm in has blown the top off. And I've had no control over the last few weeks, over my mouth, over the swearing, and certainly over the verbal abuse. You're absolutely right, I was giving to Chapper, and I'm so, so sorry. Please forgive me. I've put the top back on and I'm good." And of course we embraced, which was not normal. So that was a positive. And he did behave appropriately the rest of the few days Chapper was still with us, because of course, as I shared, I did have to get rid of the dog. I just can't trust an animal with my young child. So ultimately, my father felt really badly about that, but he took responsibility in less than an hour. How many adults do you know who have made errors in judgment with their behavior, repetitive behavior, who within 60 minutes decide not to do it again? I was very impressed with his mental toughness and his willingness to be mature.
Yes, he'd recognized actually who he was under some really difficult conditions, and you called him back to that. And,
Yes.
and you know, by comparison, our COVID crisis here is not that as severely difficult, although many people are dying from it. What would you say we need to be learning during this time about being people who stand up for what's right?
Absolutely. I like that you said stand up. That's one of my key phrases. We need to be stand upsters instead of bystanders. When we stand by and watch somebody walk past and cross a lane in the grocery store to come say hello, as a stand upster, you need to take 6 steps back and say, please keep your distance. A bystander allows it to happen, and then feels bad, and then worries for 2 weeks whether they were exposed or not. So a stand-upster, in my opinion, and the way I use the term, is by being a mature human being who takes personal responsibility for a situation. So COVID has its own problems, right? So we're looking at an entire world that has a lot of people on opposite sides. And I hate to use the word opposite, but it's true. And you've got some people who are saying they're taking all the precautions. And then you have other people saying, I heard it wasn't so bad. I'm not going to do anything. I'm an American. I can do whatever I want. You can't make me. We're looking at 2 very different responses. And I like your commentary earlier, Jim, about relational versus enemy mode. And I think that that's kind of my teaching as well, is if you want to actually understand why someone who you care about, whether it be a family member, a distant relative, or even a friend who's not handling it the way you believe they should handle it, we need to first listen. We need to first make that connection. We need to find out where their fear is, because often when we have a lack of knowledge and then we have fear, that's when we begin to move that hatred over to other people and the discrimination begins. So you get to hear, instead of COVID-19, you get to hear the Chinese sent this to us. You get to hear the blame and the scapegoating instead of, wow, this is a terrible thing. And if we were to look back into history, we know it has happened before, where it started on American soil as well. So let's just stop the blame game and remember to connect and figure out how we are going to be compassionate with those who are less educated than we happen to be. What does it take to give that education to another person in a kind, defenseless way, where they don't have to feel like they're being attacked, but that they're heard first, so that you can remain in relationship mode and make that connection and share your boundary, what's healthy for you. Whether they choose to do what you're suggesting or not is still their decision, but there's really no room for more hatred in this world. We just can't afford it.
That's quite true. And I would recommend that anyone who would like to find out more about practical steps that you would have should go to your website, standupster.com.
With an S on the end, standupsters.com.
Yeah, yes, I'm not good at spelling, but I'm glad you've got that clear. That's where we need to go and learn more practical ways of standing up for what is right in our cultural context. So thank you for sharing with us. I appreciate this this evening. You know, you taking your time out, and thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me, and happy Passover and happy Easter to everyone.
Thank you. Likewise. It's 2 hours away, isn't it?
It is.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you. And I'd like to now introduce Reverend Dr. Julia Robinson Moore and Reverend Ricky Moore, who are joining us from North Carolina. Julia and Ricky Moore both have a passion for helping people tap into God's best for their lives. Julia has been ministering for over 30 years as an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church USA, She's also an associate professor of religious studies at UNC Charlotte. And her latest book, Race, Religion, and the Pulpit, Reverend Robert L. Bradby and the Making of Urban Detroit, was published in 2015. Ricky has over 30 years of experience in telecommunications industry and is an ordained minister holding a Master of Biblical Studies from Charis Bible College. I like that because that's, Chris and Kara, joy and grace go together all the time. Together, they have launched the Moore Grace Ministries, a nonprofit corporation that provides biblically based strategies for physical and emotional healing, as well as multicultural inclusiveness. So welcome to our program tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
So glad to be here.
So let's start with our lead question. Where do you see the importance of learning to protect others from ourselves?
It's such a great question. I see it I see the need for it in many areas. As a professor who studies racism and religion, there's been a long-standing history where there has been a need to protect others against ourselves in terms of areas of racism, poverty, classism. Today, in light of COVID-19, we see this need clearly in churches and in educational systems, and certainly within the healthcare system that we see a lot. In fact, if you've been paying attention to the news, they now have said that though African Americans make up 18% of the overall population, they are actually registering 61% of the COVID cases. And those long-standing health disparities, which link to economic disparities, have dates all the way back historically to the history of segregation and the history of slavery. So, and also Native Americans and mostly minorities, people who would fit in that classification, are also experiencing the same kinds of health, wealth, and educational disparities. And so there's a huge gap. And I think that if Americans and the economic sector and the political realm, as well in healthcare, even as little as just who gets access to wealth and educational opportunities, if that mindset of we need to protect others from ourselves so that we don't hoard resources, we don't privilege one group over the other, then I think we have a more equitable society. So those are the areas where I think that there's many areas in our great country that we need to sort of involve protecting others from ourselves. So.
I know that you've been very involved with trying to bring some unity between the Black and white churches that you've encountered along the way. And you and I have talked a little bit about how that means we have to be open about our impact on each other. So that bringing that back around, what do you think we can learn during this COVID crisis that we really need to learn as a culture?
Well, I think actually I think the word globalism and the global world has sort of spoken to the ways in which we've been very disconnected, where there's so much space between us. I think what COVID has shown us is that even though we live in a global society, that we're very much impacted about what happens in other people's lives and situations. In terms of people of color or African Americans, what happens to the inner city lives of people of color or minority groups who are disenfranchised in particular kinds of ways, what happens to them actually affects the rest of society who are not maybe experiencing the same kinds of disenfranchisement or lack of economic mobility, but we're all connected. And I think what happened in China really is affecting us. And I think had the world, been able to pay more attention, we would have seen that deep kind of interconnected. The other thing that I think COVID has revealed is that there are systemic inequities built in And we're seeing sort of the residual effects of that, where we see so many people who are trying to get jobs and who can't work in particular kinds of ways. And our unemployment rate is just shot through the sky in a number of weeks. And so COVID has sort of really revealed the areas where we really need to protect each other and also reach that. And I'm going to turn this over to my hubby here.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Yeah, so just kind of dovetailing on some of the things Julia said, from a little bit more of a practical perspective, we, like many people, are looking at the data. We're looking at the metrics that are being pushed out, and we're really, from our own ministry perspective, we're saying, how can we take this data and help predict how issues are going to unfold and how they may impact people's spiritual development. And we're looking for ways and praying about ways to help, mitigate any negative impacts to people's spiritual development and growth during this time. And so I'm kind of a little bit of two minds of this. I have, as an engineer, I'm more focused on data and metrics, but as a minister, I'm more interested in connection and relationships. And the resiliency of those connections is really important, and the well-being of the person. So, like Julia mentioned, what's going on in the African American community, it hits home with us in several ways, because some of the things that our parents and grandparents and we can recall things that they went through, and some of the that we experience ourselves as younger Americans here. When you start looking at what some of the data is saying, that African Americans are more susceptible because of underlying health conditions and whatnot. It doesn't take much for us to look across our family tree to see some of those same things, and then to start getting reports on cousins, friends, aunts who are dying, literally. I mean, we've had some in our not too distant family that have passed since this started. So it's hitting home to us very real. So
yeah, the statistics I see also show African Americans being disproportionately high, not just in getting the COVID virus, but also in deaths from it. So
right.
It's a very, very serious impact there. But knowing that people start out with very small steps, is there any specific step that you'd like to see us taking as a culture, as our next little steps here to move in the right direction?
I do. One of the main steps that I think needs to be communication about the disparities and inequities in society. And I think whether for Christians, especially for the church, those conversations really need to start within the church, and as well as the larger community. And I think the space to start those conversations has to be in connection with Jesus Christ. It's very important that conversations about race and any kind of ism start with a connection about who we are as people of Jesus Christ, how Jesus Christ responds, how he models relationship, how he models disagreements, how he models just ministry. And so I think in the past, that kind of space, starting with Jesus and then moving into race or ethnic differences, hasn't been used. And I think what is needed today is to start those practical conversations. And really, it's just about sharing the story.
Absolutely. I would just add a couple things as well. I have a few bullet points I want to share, and some of these may be very intuitive in ways, but some may not. As much as possible, be intentional with the ways that you should disconnect and recharge. I mean, those are some practical things that people can do. One of the things that we've been pursuing is becoming what we're calling cultural architects, and we're actually referencing Isaiah 58, specifically the area where it talks about being repairer of the breaches. We're really seeking the Lord for direction and insight on how to do that. The other thing is engage in forgiveness. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that and prayer and really partaking of Holy Communion or the Eucharist, really just to help guard your heart and mind against any negative effects of stress. You know, remembering, and this is a very, very simple statement, but some people need to remember this, just to remember that God is not mad at you. You know, seek the Lord for how to love yourself and love others well. You know, seeking for direction on how to be safe, how to make decisions that impact your job and family. I mean, people are making decisions now whether or not to stay on their job or to walk off, and what that impact may have on their immediate family or on other people that they have contact with. Reach out to others in practical ways. You know, don't isolate. Spend time focusing on how to address the needs of others. But again, we believe that starts with seeking the Lord. The other thing is encourage parents and leaders in the community to press into forgiveness. Now, we mentioned this a moment ago, but we really believe this is so important, specifically in areas where you may not hear of it talked about as much. Things along the lines of institutional racism, classism, places where, like Julia mentioned before, where there's been disparity in the medical institutions, and just historically, they may not be there today as much, but I can recall experiencing some of that in my lifetime. My parents can recall experiencing. And, you know, like the young lady mentioned on the last interview, there is a bleeding down of impact that happens.
Yes, there is.
And it touches the lives of people. That's the reason why some African Americans are more reluctant to go to seek medical help, because of the distrust in the system. And so just handling things from the perspective of, you know, exercising forgiveness and starting there is so powerful. So anyway, those are some of the items I want to mention.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I'd love to be able to go farther with you in a future discussion right there, but I appreciate both of you sharing this perspective. And I would just like to say that it's probably the kind of news that makes most people feel uncomfortable. I don't know how I fit in the middle of that. And so your statement that we need to start with our connection with Jesus in order to move forward is where I'd like to bridge to the introduction of our next guest, whose specialty is helping people encounter Jesus. But thank you very much, Reverend Moore, for your contribution to us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce Margaret Webb, who's a counselor. She's the founder and president of Alive and Well. She's a Life Model Works board member. And you sent me a note of something else I should be mentioning along with this that did not get onto my cheat sheet here. So what else was I supposed to let them know?
You mentioned it just a minute ago that I'm particularly focused on Emmanuel prayer. And I train people how to do really good Emmanuel prayer to help them connect with Jesus.
So where do you see that in terms of the important task of protecting others from ourselves? How does Jesus play into this?
Very central. I'm primarily focused on families and marriages and, you know, individuals as a therapist and as a trainer. So my thinking has been going so much to families, and I think about, and couples who are quarantined together. Maybe they live in a very small space, or there's strain on the relationship in a marriage. There's financial strain. Children are going squirrely. Moms who don't usually homeschool. There's a lot of stress going on. So that's my thinking of what I think about as I pray in the mornings about this. And so when you guys asked me to think about what I would bring, I thought about some practical life model skills, which I've
That's
learned
what we'd
from
love to
you,
hear, yes.
that could very much help people handle the stress of all that they're experiencing right now.
Okay. Why don't you outline some of those for us and we can put them to work?
All right. So I came up with just some bullet points. One of the things that we've learned from Dr. Wilder is that expressing appreciation and verbally expressing gratitude, along with smiles and eye contact, turns on our relational circuitry in the brain, and it synchronizes our brain so that it works better. Relationships will thrive much better in an experience of gratitude and appreciation. And so some of our listeners have already learned about that from Life Model. Others maybe haven't learned about the significance of appreciation, but it's very central to what we do as Life Model practitioners. So it's very simple, but it's very profound because it's based on brain science, the way our brain does relationship. So if you're already expressing appreciation, ramp it up, do it more. Do it as much as you possibly can, and teach your children how to express appreciation to each other, to their parents, to their friends. It's an incredible skill for them to learn for life. So that's number one, express appreciation all day long.
Okay.
The next one is to begin the day with prayer as a family, as a couple, as a family, as a group of roommates. Begin the day with prayer. Not just sort of a laundry list of things, but I had the image of each person in the group praying for someone else in the group. You know, having a child pray for another child, for the
A
parent.
real relational connection of some kind.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes, and teach them to be praying for real struggles that the other person might be having, or that sort of thing, so that it isn't just perfunctory. But what a wonderful opportunity to establish a whole new life practice as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Emmanuel prayer really is just some very focused ways of relationally experiencing the presence of Jesus. I have a book to hold up, but does that look backwards?
Nope, it's right on our end. The computers flip it around for you. No worries.
Oh, okay, good. So this book has to do with journaling with Jesus, and it's a wonderful private, like a devotional practice. And this is available on Life Model, and it's one of the ways that we can learn how to interact with Jesus in a way that is getting in touch with how he feels about me. And I need that in order to be confident and calm and my best self. I need to know how Jesus feels about me. And so in the family setting, how does Jesus feel about each member in the family? And then we can join with how Jesus feels. The next one is, I live on 40 acres in the Ozark Mountains, which is just the most wonderful place to be quarantined. And so we're getting outside every day, and I just think about people who are in apartments or have, et cetera, and I grieve for that. But if you even have a balcony, get outside. You have to get outside. You need fresh air. You need exercise. Children need to run around. So if you have a park where you can do social distancing, but we can't leave our bodies out of this equation. And then, Jim, you've taught us about, you call it shalom for our bodies, or bringing peace to our bodies. And this is something we can teach children too, is doing a systematic relaxing of the entire body, so that, like, for children at night, these children are probably anxious about what's going on. And to be able to work through their, relax your legs, relax your tummy, relax your arms. it's be so helpful just to bring relaxation to, especially a child.
Well, what if you're getting frustrated? What would you suggest?
Yes, I was just going to get to that, Jim. Wonderful question. If a family member is getting frustrated, gather around him or her and express love and appreciation until they come back to joy. And, you know, we have this, oh, my dog needs to be let out of the room. I will be back in a nanosecond. Go on, go away, go away. So sorry.
Yeah, no problem. We have about 1 minute left, so let's
Yes. So
help our frustrated friends.
yes, we can kind of just physically come around a person that's frustrated. Even if it's like the dad or the mom, do like a circle around that person and just start expressing your love and appreciation for them. And that will help them calm themselves. And then with, especially I think about couples, if you're starting to ramp up and your frustration is escalating, learn to notice when you're becoming overwhelmed and when the other person is becoming overwhelmed, so that
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you notice,
What do you notice?
what do you notice?
Yes.
Voice tone.
Wow.
Voice tone starts to get louder and maybe squeakier. Body gets rigid, the face gets rigid. If there's, you know, you almost like draw back physically from another person that you're starting to get into a conflict spiral with. People start not acting like their best self. And when we notice these things, whether it's a child or a spouse or a friend, we can help by pausing the situation. It's a skill. It's the number 9 skill of the life model brain skills, is to learn how to pause, even put ourselves in timeout. I sometimes have to do that. I have to say, I need a break. I'm going to go in my office or somewhere where I can be alone and get with the Lord and get myself de-escalated.
Well, thank you for that. And I liked your transparency and honesty to say this is something that we learned by practicing it when we need it in our own lives. That's part of you protecting others from yourself by realizing, you know, if I go forward, I'm not going to be the person God meant me to be.
Yes.
So let me go find that person, and then we'll continue this event here. So thank you for sharing that with us. I know you have more that you could say, and maybe you can write that in some blogs for us too, and sort of share the wealth of your information. But thank you for joining us, Margaret, and for all you do. Now I'd like to introduce to you Lori Mateer, who's also a counselor. She's a coach, speaker, relationship trainer. She helps others mature relationally as individuals, couples, and community. Lori is actively developing her own relational brain skills, and she was part of a 15-week Pandora problem training last year, began to practice loving her enemies and protecting others from herself. And the Pandora problem exercises were transforming some of your old bad brain habits. And Lori is passionate about learning how to come out of enemy mode so we can protect others from ourselves and love our enemies. So where do you see the importance of learning to protect others from yourselves, Lori?
Well, I needed that first in my life. I grew up in a family and in a community that was never taught. We actually learned how to be enemies really well. And I just thought it was normal. I thought this is how you have to live. You have to live guarding and protecting yourself because it's dangerous. And then I started to get exposed to the brain science and really started to realize I live my life in my amygdala, which is fight, flight, or freeze, the part of your brain. And I think I realized at one point, I think I said I probably lived 90% of my life here and felt like it was normal. And what that means is that my relational brain and loving my enemies did not come easily. I could love those that loved me, and as long as they did what I wanted them to do. right? And
Oh, yeah.
then, then I started to realize like, oh, this is something that's really broken. But if I practice these exercises, that maybe it can change. And let me give you an example. So, and you catch yourself a lot faster. I might have been standing a distance away at a coffee shop the other day and watching people go in and out. And I was sitting there realizing who feels like my friend that's walking in there and who doesn't feel like my friend. Oh, those that were doing this, they felt like my friend. Those that weren't doing this didn't feel like my friend. And then I looked a couple doors down, and those that were walking in the liquor store at 9 in the morning, I had opinions. And I sat there and I thought, it is that quick to slide down the brain and decide, are you good? Are you bad? Are you right? Are you wrong? And they're no longer people to me. And so or you can be driving down the road and you're in the left lane, and left lane is for passing, right? And you look at the people and why aren't they doing it? Can be something so small, and then on a bigger scale, how it showed up in my marriage was really tragic. So super important to see how you can just quickly go from not being tender, not seeing them as your people, to how do I fix them? How do I change them? What's wrong with them?
So what practical steps can you give us for getting out of that enemy mode? Protecting others from yourself, it's kind of the same thing, right? We have to get out of enemy mode if we're going to protect anybody.
Exactly. And I would say the first one truly for me, and this is what I learned when I did the Pandora problem last year, is I have to get back to gratefulness, which what I liken that to is climbing a mountain, because it feels like I'm climbing a mountain. I'm back here. I'm not relational. I just want to get away from the situation. I want to fix the situation. I want the person to get away. I don't want to talk to them. And it feels like it's climbing a mountain to go, okay, what distressing feeling am I feeling? Can't go there. But if I can go here and say, what am I grateful for? And so I'll go to the Lord, and I can always be grateful for something there. I can't necessarily be grateful for the person in front of me that I'm having the reaction to, but I can be grateful for the Lord. And, it can be just this: Lord, thank you. Thank you that I can breathe today. Thank you that today it is a beautiful day in Colorado, and that the sun is out, and that, that it's lovely. Once I go there, now I'm connecting again. And then I wait and I listen. And I think a lot about this, like when Jesus healed the 10 and only one came back, I don't feel like Jesus was saying, oh, do this because I need it. I always say, I think Jesus was saying, can we keep relating? Can we keep connecting? So then he wants to connect with us in that place. And it's like my dear child. And then I listen to what he wants to say to me. And it's always good. If it's not good, it's not Jesus. And then if I'm struggling and I go, I think I'm in enemy mode, but God, would you help me know who my enemy feels like right now? But a lot of times I think we know who our enemy is. Our enemy is that person who is just, when you see them, you feel that. You went into that store? All the things that we do. When I'm in that place, I then have to say, Lord, what do you want me to know about loving this person? Because if I can see them how God sees them, then I have a much better chance at coming out of that place. And then what I do is I'll share that. If I can't share it out loud to somebody, I share it out loud. And I just make it a verbal conversation out loud with the Lord, just so my brain can hear that, because my brain needs a lot of practice in hearing what God says, because it's had a lot of practice of thinking everything is bad and scary, and the enemy is bad and scary, and I can't handle that.
Well, so that sounds like the first thing you want to do is notice. Then you have to sort of deliberately go find something to be thankful for. And generally, even though a person provides nothing to be thankful for, you can be thankful that God's with you and you don't have to face this person by yourself. And then when you're feeling connected with God, you ask them, how does God see that other person, so that you share God's point of view. And that's the process you walk through. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about that has this worked for you, for instance?
Yes. Yes.
What happens when it works for you?
Peace. You know, I thought that staying in that guarded position is what kept me safe, but there's no peace there. And it's a false safety, right? It's that false safety of I can take care of me when it's God and me, I feel a lot safer than when it's me all by myself. And can I relate it to COVID? In a little bit of the COVID, it's going to be so easy to make enemies of people because everybody is anxious right now. And, you know, everybody is scared. The medical system is being pulled to the absolute limits. And it's that place of, I heard a very dear friend say, you know, how do we get to bring who we are to this situation? And in the past, I would have been like, I can't believe they didn't do this, or I can't believe they didn't take care of this. And it was like, oh, okay, so this is a problem and this is a hard situation, but what is it like me to offer in this situation? And I can go to enemy mode really quickly, or I can choose to hear how God sees that situation. And then maybe we'll all get through COVID a little with a little more peace.
I would just thank you for saying that and taking us through the process. And I'd like to encourage people myself to just say that, you know, maybe you catch yourself later, like you just went into enemy mode, but it's never too late to go back to Jesus and say, well, at least let me pray for the situation and learn from it so that next time I'll remember sooner who you mean us to be. So thank you for sharing that with us, Lori, and taking the time to be with us. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for their contribution and their wisdom and openness to be with us this evening. And Michael, it's back to you.
Yeah, and stay on the line here with me, Jim. You know, I looked up the Serenity Prayer again today. I never had memorized it before, but I think it's a great time for us to pray St. Francis's Serenity Prayer of making us an instrument of peace. This is a great opportunity for us to shine with Christ in our lives into an anxious world, like Lori was saying. So I just want to say a few things a little bit more about our organization, Life Model Works. Just really simple. Our website, lifemodelworks.org. There's a lot of great resources there, and it will lead you to other places and other ministries that are doing the same kinds of things that we're doing in the ecosystem of the Life Model. Then just to mention, our Facebook page is very active. We've been doing these daily passing the peace exercises, and they're recorded. And so we're going to actually end the campaign on Saturday, but the recordings are there, and they're also on our YouTube page, which is Life Model Works. So please look us up if you're interested. If these conversations have sparked your heart, you know, we want to know you. We want to be connected to you, and we ask for your prayers because, like a lot of nonprofits, we're in a tight spot right now, and we need your prayers and support. We have a campaign on our Facebook page. It's called Peace 19 instead of COVID-19, and it's $19, and you get some goodies from that and some feeding, and it's just a little campaign to help us raise some funds in a tight time for us. One of the things that we're doing is we're translating Passing the Peace, the booklet, into Chinese and in its Mandarin, and also into the Indonesian language, because we want to give away these books to Christian people who are wanting to pass the peace in these cultures where the virus is also really stretching people to the max. One of our main missions is to equip existing networks. We're a little SWAT team, and so we need your help too. We've got a lot of open doors, a lot of influence, potential influence into organizations and leaders of organizations. And we feel like we've got a mission and we've got something to give. We've got something to say that we think can change the world. I call it a relational renaissance or relational revolution. I think our world is ripe for these skills to be passed along. And also to stop hate. As you like to say, Dr. Wilder, you go right to the heart of the matter. hate can veil itself, and we can think, oh, I don't hate anybody, when actually there's a lot of hate. And we need to take the lid off of that in a gracious way, and show each other how hate operates, and that we really can, with the help of Jesus, stop this kind of thing from spreading. And so this is a big part of our mission. Just again, say, follow us on Twitter. It's simple, Life Model Works on Twitter, at Life Model Works, and you get daily little nuggets, of how to stop hate, how to be more relational, how to keep these relational circuits on, the kinds of things we've been talking about tonight. And just make another appeal for donations. If you go to our website, right on the main menu, there's a donate button. We need help right now to keep the lights on and keep the engine rolling and to do the stuff that God's called us to do, and we can't do it alone. So we need your help and your prayers. Pray for us. So, Doctor, my friend Jim, you maybe can close with a prayer or something. How's that?
Certainly. Paul said, I kneel before the Father from whom all families on earth take their name. And so to the one who created all of us, who looks on no person as his enemy, and wants us all to become fully filled with God's presence and wisdom and spirit, and become the people that who love each other in ways that remind us of who God is. May your will, Lord God, be done with us this day and guide us through these next days. We pray for the healing of those who need it. We pray for those who have no resources, and for the systems that are overtaxed and inadequate, that your presence would bring peace, healing, and save lives in this time. Teach us to be those who protect others. And we pray these in the name of the Creator of the world, our Lord God. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. God bless you. Thanks to our panelists, and thanks to you for joining tonight. And if your friends weren't able to get on, it will be recorded. It's available in 24 hours, and those who registered will get an email with the link to the webinar and the video part of it this time. So God bless you. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Good night.